In John chapter 14, verse 27, Jesus said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." Father, we thank you today for your word. Thank you for these folk that are here tonight. I ask you, Lord, just you be our preacher, not teaching. We'll praise you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. If you, today, everything is on the internet. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just about the only thing, basically, the only thing the post office is really relishing in right now is sending me all that junk that I just throw in the garbage can. But if you want somebody to know something about somebody, put it on Facebook, but put it under your wife's name, and that way they won't know that you did it. Clyde, how do you think that's going to work? Clyde's not saying much tonight. Anyhow. The internet says this, that they have the answer. If you type in the phrase peace of mind, the internet engine will show you the top 10 responses on the internet. And this is what they were. And I thought this was so awesome. I know you like it. Number 1, self-help studies. Now, if you want peace of mind, just go get you some self-help studies and help yourself. Okay? Number 2 was, listen to this, the peace of mind home security systems. How to do it. Number 3 was, Clyde, you need to listen to number 3. Peace of mind funeral services. Number 4 was a reggae band called Peace of Mind. Number 5 was Peace of Mind candles, crystals, and body soaps. Light your candle, set your crystal up in the shower, and take a bath. How to give you peace of mind. Number 6 is a company selling cancer insurance. Number 7 is a company that sells home inspections that takes the guesswork out of buying a home. Number 8, Russell's going to love this, was a plumbing warranty plan that insures your toilet. Me and Russell are thinking about going into plumbing business together. And I know we all appreciate that. You need to write that down because a lot of us are anxious about insuring our toilet. Number 9 was the hypnosis therapy clinic. Now, I don't know just exactly how you hypnotize yourself. Maybe if you look in the mirror and you convince yourself that you look good, you'll walk away looking better or having peace of mind. Dale, I don't have to tell you this. Me and you in trouble, son. And number 10 was a Baptist church in Texas. You figure Baptists go get in that somehow or another. For some reason or another, everybody wants to have peace of mind, and they want to tell you how to do it. They may not have it, but they can tell you how to get it. Have you ever noticed that? I saw an ad. This is what I really wanted to share. I saw an ad that called Peace Perfume on the internet. You can order that. I mean, the title said, "Wear it and feel serenity." Wow. I mean, you just put a little perfume under your arm, behind your ear, and man, you have peace of mind. Okay, maybe not. People try all kind of things, trying to find some kind of peace of mind. Very few people in this world actually are at peace with themselves. Most people, that's common knowledge, that most people carry a very high degree of stress, of anxiety, of tension in their lives. And over my 50 years of preaching, I have found that there are a lot of things in life that will take your peace away from you, that'll rob your peace of mind. And so we're going to look at 2 or 3 of those tonight. And the first one is, and this I think affects most of everybody, and that's the reason it's first. And that is when circumstances are uncontrollable, we often lose our peace. So what does that mean? That means when there are things in our life that's called life. You understand what I'm saying? Now, let me tell you again, just in case you don't remember it, life is not fair. Nobody ever said life was fair. The Bible didn't say life is fair. God is fair. Life isn't fair. But we lose our peace of mind when we feel like things are out of our control. I mean big things, like when the guy in front of you won't move when the light has changed. Hello? Now, I know there's nobody in here that would get frustrated about that, If you want to ride with me sometimes, then I can give you some lessons. But those are just simple things that sometimes cause us to get a little frustrated. But the bigger things in life are the things that causes us to lose our peace of mind. When we have issues with our family or issues with our health or issues with our finances, and we don't feel like that we have control over it, then it causes us to get frustrated. And when we get frustrated, we lose our peace of mind. Okay? And then the second thing is, and this is just, you need to be in the ministry for about 50 years, and you can understand number 2 here. When people are unchangeable, we tend to lose our peace. People naturally resist change. That's just a normal thing. They resent it when you try to change things. They resent it more when you try to change them. A personal improvement program for your husband or your wife or your children is guaranteed you to cause frustration. When you tell your wife she needs to change, she may not be frustrated, but you will be in short order. Okay? People resent change, and sometimes they resent you because you're for change. And it happens in church a lot. Church people don't like change. They like everything just like it was when Paw was the deacon here, And so anyway, then this is so simple. It's when our problems are unexplainable. We know that life isn't fair. We understand that. And not everybody is going to have a happy ending and live happily ever after. That's the reason we have divorces and attorneys and judges and nosy neighbors and brother-in-laws and mother-in-laws. Okay, did I cover everybody? Okay, because there are things that don't turn out right, and there are people in our lives that feel like they are ordained of God to remind us of it ever so often. I know none of you have people like that in your family, but if you do, then you don't have to go any further. When you don't know why things happen, to you, sometimes things happen because we're stupid. Hello? You understand what I'm saying? A lot of things happen in my life because I made stupid decisions. And so I still got no, Brian, don't bring that up. I'm still trying to forget it. Russell will be done thought about it again. I got those put up over there. Russell. You know what Brian did? Now, why would Brian bring that back up, you know? For those of you that are new here, Brian is relating to the fact that I was doing some wiring and I needed to move a 220, and I thought the best way to do it without having to go through the whole process of trying to figure out where it went to was to just take these hedge clippers and cut it. That went over. I thought it went over real well. Now the hedge clippers are snaggletooth, but other than that, I had the handles were rubber, and the lights kind of flickered for a little while. Other than that, I didn't have any problems with it. Yeah, that's the reason I'm going to go back and sell plumbing in church. I'm going to sell toilet in church. That's it, right there. Yeah, I had to get me some peace of mind. The people with me too. So when you don't understand why these things are happening to you, it has a tendency to get us anxious. It sometimes gets us nervous, which leads to causing us to be stressed out. And so we lose our peace. And when we lose our peace, what else do we lose? Our joy. Yeah. Dale said his temper. That's a part of this joy. When you lost your joy, your temper's next. That's coming to you. Yeah. See what y'all got yourself into? We got some new people here. They've been here on Wednesday night before. And they're thinking, Lord Jesus, did we take the right turn here? Yeah. God has promised peace of mind because it is a fundamental need in our life. That's why Jesus asked us and reminded us that he came to give us peace. One of the Hebrew names for God that we've been looking at these names over a period of weeks is Jehovah Shalom, which actually means peace. Jehovah Shalom means I am the God of peace. And so the most used greeting in the New Testament between Christians is grace and or peace. So we are geared to live peaceful lives. And we don't like it when things get out of whack. 3 times in John chapter 20, Jesus said, peace be with you. In John 14:27, he says, I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart, and the peace I give is not fragile like the peace the world gives. So do not be troubled or afraid. So if God says, I'm giving you this gift of peace, what does he mean? I think he means it's not something you have to work for. A gift is not something you work for. If you have to work for a gift, then you've earned it. It's not a gift anymore. Okay? So God says, I'm going to give you a gift. And the gift that I have for you is this peace. I want you to have peace, and I'm giving it to you. I mean, you don't have to beg for it. You don't have to try out for it. You don't have to plead for it. It's simply a gift. Then if that's true, then why don't I have it? Why is it that so many of us are stressed out, that we don't have that peace, we don't have that contentment in our life? Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the path to personal peace, and we're going to go as far as we can. We're going to do about half of this tonight and half of it next Wednesday night. So let me just say right here straight up that peace has nothing to do with problem-free living. Okay? All of us are going to have problems in our life. It may be cutting off a 220 with a hedge clipper, or it may be something else, cutting off the wrong pipe on your plumbing under the house, and wonder why your sink don't work anymore. But other than that, hey, I'm a slow learner, but I'm getting there. I learned 2 things. Don't cut the pipe off if you don't know where it's going to, and don't cut a 220 with your hedge clippers if you ever planning on using them again. See, I'm coming. I'm gonna graduate here pretty soon. So the truth of the matter is, all of us are going to encounter some kind of problems. And a problem-free life is not going to happen in this life. This life is not heaven. Okay? And so we got issues here. Jesus said in this world, you're going to have problems. So he didn't want us to be disillusioned about being saved. Just because you get saved doesn't mean that God's going to go, no more problems for you. No, that's not going to happen. You get saved and Satan says, problems for you. Huh? All right. So you can count on it. Peace of mind doesn't come from conflict-free living. Most of your life, you're going to have some kind of conflict with people. There are going to be some people in your life. Now, I know this is probably, you don't have any in your life. But there are going to be some people in your life that's just going to rub you the wrong way. Huh? Do you have, no, don't raise your hand. I mean, there's some folks, listen, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. There's some people I just don't want to be around. They just tick me off. It's about, you're the pastor. Well, yeah, last time I checked, I was human too. You know? Now, don't sit out there and act like you don't know what I'm talking about. There's some folk that just get on your nerves. Huh? So you're right, preacher? Yeah, I know that. Yeah, we're all in the same boat. We on the same river called life. And so there's just some people that just get on our nerves. And so we just need to understand that. There are 3 important decisions that we need to make about having conflict in life. And this is it. Are you ready? The first is acceptance. The second is choose to trust. And the third is choose to surrender. Now, we may get, I might get all of this in. First of all, now I learned this, Dale teaches this. There's a bunch of folk that have heard this. Accept what you cannot change. There's just some things, you just can't change it. Worrying about what cannot be changed is all it's going to do is wear you out. Becoming resentful or bitter about what cannot be changed, not going to give you any peace. One of the things that you and I have in our life, and thank God that he's given us victory, most of us have victory over it. And that is feeling guilty about things that cannot be changed will not give you peace. You need to stop beating beating yourself over the head. Yesterday's gone. You're not going to change it. Tomorrow hadn't got here. So you aren't going to do any successful, constructive life rebuilding by worrying about it today. Okay? There's only one thing that's going to bring peace in your life, and that is to accept what you cannot change. That's one of the things that you're going to have to do. Acceptance of what can't be changed. The Bible said in 2 Samuel chapter 12, there's a story about King David who had a baby that was dying, and David did everything he could to keep that baby from dying. You know the story. I mean, he prayed in the temple for 7 days, and all day and all night. He didn't eat. He wept. He fasted. He cried. He pleaded with God. And on the 7th day, the baby died. God didn't answer his prayer. I don't know why God didn't, but he didn't. You understand? When David's observers and his advisors heard that the baby had died, they were scared to death. In their mind, they thought he's already just about over the edge, and now that this baby's dead, he may just lose it all. So they were afraid. David heard them whispering. And the Bible said, he asked the question, has the child died? And they said, yes, the child is dead. And the Bible says that David got up, he went and took a bath, put on clean clothes, ate a big meal, and went back to being the king. The advisors and the people that were working with him and under him were absolutely astounded. They said, "What are you doing? I mean, what are you doing? You were in agony just yesterday. You wouldn't eat, you wouldn't drink, you wouldn't sleep, you wouldn't take a bath, and now that the child has died, you're okay. What's wrong?" And David said, "The child has gone to heaven. And one day I'll die, and I'll be united and go to heaven with the child. In the meantime, there's nothing else that I can do. I've got to go back to being the king of my people." He accepted what he could not change. The Apostle Paul was taken to Rome, put in prison, and was awaiting execution by Nero. During that time, Paul wrote one of the greatest books in the New Testament, and that is the book of Philippians. The book of Philippians is the most positive book of joy that I have ever studied. In that, Paul said, in that circumstance, I have learned to be content. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, reads like this in the Greek: "I have learned to be satisfied with the things I have and with everything that happens." Notice the words, "with everything that happens." I know how to live when I am poor, and I know how to live when I have plenty. I have learned the secret of being happy at any time in everything. And here's the secret: I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Notice several things. First of all, acceptance is a learned experience. He said, I have learned to be content. It's a learned experience. Okay? Because if you hadn't learned it, then you're never going to have it. Contentment just is not something you go to Walgreens and buy a pack of. You understand what I'm saying? It is a way that you work with your mind. Now remember the thing I tell you almost every week. This is the trophy right here. Satan wants your mind. If he can get you worried, if he can get you anxious, if he can get you angry, if he can get you bitter, if he can get you with an unforgiving attitude, if he can get all of those things in your mind, I promise you, he is going to steal your joy. Why? Because he has stolen your peace. Write this down if you don't have it memorized. There is no joy without peace. There is no joy without peace. So if Satan can steal your peace, he has stolen the joy of your relationship with God and with other people. So let me tell you one thing that keeps you from peaceful circumstances, and that's what we call nervous, stressed out people. And then that is when you demand an explanation from God for everything that's happening in your life. Or you expect the preacher to have the answer. You know what? When I first started preaching, of course, I didn't know anything. I mean, I was as dumb as a pack of rocks, especially when it came to Scripture. I didn't know anything about Scripture. I didn't know anything about church. I just knew I didn't like it. I didn't know anything about preachers. I didn't like any of them. God must have a great sense of humor. He said, watch this. This guy not only is going to get am I going to straighten this guy's life out? I'm going to call him to preach it, and he's going to be pastor of a church. And then he just kind of sat back and grinned and waited. So you need to understand that there are some things that you aren't going to have an answer for. Why did God allow this to happen in my life? So I want you to see 2 or 3 more things about when we demand an explanation from God about things that happen in our life. One of the first thing is God doesn't owe you an explanation. You say, well, yeah, he's my father. He's my father, and he loves me. Sure he is. But he's also God. Your father was never your God. He might act like it sometimes, like he wanted to be. But he wasn't. Our God is a good God. And our God is a just God. And our God is a fair God, a loving God. And he understands a lot about life that you and I don't know. Isn't that right? Yeah, sure, absolutely. So you know what I need to do? Just say, okay, God, you got this. Isn't that right? Amen. Now I'm going to tell you, I was texting my man Bruce over there before he went up over to mission over in Asheville. And I told him, I was praying for him, and I said, but always remember this, God's got this. If God's God, he's got this. Isn't that right? Yeah, he's not caught off guard either. Boy, let me, I don't have time to tell you this. I'm working on Christmas sermons. Son, I got the best Christmas sermon I've ever put together. I can't hardly wait for Christmas to get here. Oh, yeah. Anyhow, I just thought I'd let you know we're going to have a good Christmas this year. So, if you have to have God to explain everything to you, then there's only one reason. Are you ready? You don't trust him. If you think God owes you an explanation for everything that's happening in your life, it's because you don't trust God to take care of you. You say, well, how can you say that? Because this Bible says that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Is that what your Bible says? If God is in control, if he guides the footsteps of his children, and if he's working all things in my life, not all things are going to be good, but all things work together for what? Good. Not all things are good, but all things work together, working together for good. All right? So, I think the third thing is because explanations never bring us peace. You say, well, you don't know that. Sure. This is what we think in our mind. If I just knew why this happened, then it would make sense. No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. I'm going to use an example, an illustration here that some of you may not like. So you just go ahead and make up your mind you're going to have to forgive me anyhow. All right, because that's what that book said, that it's your responsibility to forgive me. Let's just suppose in my life, in my life, okay, you can't take your life out of this equation and just, we're going to talk about Clifton for a while, okay? Let's just suppose that Linda left me for somebody else. I mean, I don't know why she would do that. Why would you give up cake for dirt? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know why she would do something like that. Say amen, Mark. Thank you, son. But anyhow, let's just suppose that she left me for somebody else. And I can't figure out why. And I'm pretty sure it's not my fault. Hello? Are y'all listening? Are you listening to me? I mean, I'm trying to figure out why in the world this woman left me because she had the very best there was. I was a good husband. I was a good father. I was a pretty decent preacher. Why would she leave me for that dumb deacon? Now, follow me here, because I'm thinking in my mind, this is how you think. You get it all out of whack. If I could just knew why she left me, I would be better off. I could lay this thing down. I could lay it to rest. If I just knew why she left me, I could handle it. That's a bald-faced lie. You said, oh, no. No. I'm going to tell you, can I just be honest with you? I'm going to tell you, I'm still wanting to kill him. And her too. If you've heard my testimony, I think it's on that testimony CD. Somebody asked me how me and Linda had lived together so long, how she lived with me so long. And I said, it's a simple equation. I told her when we first got married, if she ever left me, I was going to kill her. June the 1st will be 55 years. She still believes it. I got more guns in my house than Pete and them's got in their store down there. Not quite that many. She said, would you show me how to work that gun? I said, you don't need to know how. Look, I just look this way. I ain't this stupid. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let me show you, honey, how to work this gun. Just pull that hammer back there and point it, you know. There ain't no way I'm going to tell you how to work that gun. Just call somebody to break it in. Call me. I can be there in a little bit. Isn't that right? Yeah, don't say it. If your wife is here, just don't agree with anything I'm saying, okay? So here's the thing about it is that we still feel resentful, and we still feel bitter, and we still feel angry, and we still feel upset or whatever, because explanations never satisfy. You know why? Because there's no delete button. Are you listening? Now, all of you know that there's only one thing I really love about computers. What is it? Delete button. My wife made my day today. I had a bunch of. I can't believe I brought my phone to him because I guess I thought Jesus might want to talk to me. But I had a bunch of all these emails I had. I said, Linda, can I delete my deleted emails? She said, yeah. She said, give me that phone. Let me show you something. She clicked on, I don't know what she did, but she handed it back to me. And I had 1,200 and something emails that I had deleted on my telephone. Son, I thought Santa Claus had come to see me. She said, you can delete them all at one time. I said, oh, no. No, I got 1,200 little hands right here. Pick, 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 pick. Son, I deleted. I was so happy I had to go take me a nap. I'm telling you, it was good stuff. But our mind isn't that way. You know why? We don't forget. There's no delete button. Huh? God will give you some peace over it. God will He'll love you through it. But you don't ever forget the pain and the frustration and sometimes the anger when life doesn't go the way we have it planned. I remember a guy by the name of Job. You remember old Job? He lived right down below Montgomery on Interstate 85 down there somewhere. Job is a classic example. He won the Super Bowl of suffering. Yeah. I mean, this guy was the wealthiest man alive at that particular day and time. He was a godly man. He had dedicated his devotion to God. One day, in a 48-hour period, he lost it all. All of his 10 kids were murdered. He lost all of his wealth. His crops were destroyed. His flocks, herds were destroyed. He went bankrupt instantly, and he lost everything overnight. And if that wasn't bad enough, he woke up the next morning with a terrible, painful disease that left open sores all over his body, oozing out with pus. It left him in pain 24 hours a day. Now, you'd think that's tough. I mean, that's tough. Isn't it? I mean, you think about that. I mean, that's tough. You would think it couldn't get any worse. Oh, yes, it did. You know how worse it got? A nagging wife. You said, Preacher, you've hit them wives pretty good. Mine not here. Yeah, and when Aaron and David gets through taking all this stuff out of YouTube, that this sermon tonight is going to be 4.5 minutes long. I'll just tell you right straight there. She came to him. He's sitting out there in the junk pile with broken pottery, raking, trying to get the pus out of his sores. He lost everything he had, and his wife gave him this wonderful advice. Why don't you go down to Walgreens and get you some medicine? No, that's not what she said. She said, why don't you just go ahead and cuss God and die? Now, that's what I call emotional support right there, son. Yeah. But the most difficult thing in Job's circumstances was that he had no explanation for it. He didn't know why. And I'm sure he must have asked God 1,000 times. And you know what? God didn't tell him. The truth of the matter is, that's not the end of the story. When you read the end of the story in Job's life, the Bible says that God restored him fourfold. He got more money, a bigger family, a gorgeous wife that was sweeter than sugar. You said, well, the Bible don't say that. Well, hey, he blessed him. You know, amen. He gave him something better. She said, well, how do you know she wasn't there? Well, if she's still there, God changed her mind. Isn't that right? Remember that you remember in school, Dale, can you remember back that far? You remember in school when the class was taking a test and the teacher is always walking around making everybody be silent? You know why? She didn't want you to disturb somebody else. No, she was walking by my desk to see if I was cheating. I'm just telling you, because I was probably wanting to talk and asked, what is question number 6? The truth of the matter is, sometimes in life, we just need to be quiet and wait on God. We were talking just a few minutes ago about our substance abuse program, and I was talking to a young lady. I don't call names, but she's a whole lot better looking than the guy she married, but was talking about happy to be a part of this program. And I thought that'd be pretty honest. Let me tell you what, one of the greatest things that I was taught wasn't in church. Are you ready? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, and the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you, God, will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. If you've ever been in a rehab program, you know that prayer. I have that prayer in my bookshelf on a plate in my office. You see, when you and I are willing to accept the things that we can't change, instead of allowing those things to make us bitter, God wants to use those things to make us better. It makes a lot of difference. All the power is in the second verse, second part of that prayer. And the wisdom to know the difference. The wisdom to know the difference. Sometimes we are slow learners. There are some things we are hell-bent to do something about, and it's impossible to change. So you might as well just live with it. Trust God with it, because God's got something better for you. And this next thing I want to talk to you about. Ooh, I only got 8 minutes. But not, let me see how many more pages I got. Oh, I ain't got but 10 more pages. Heck, probably ain't going to get through tonight. This is a great little place to stop. Trusting God's loving care. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You, Lord, give true peace to those who depend on you because they trust in you." God gives peace to those who trust in Him because they depend on Him. Isn't that right? Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding." That is, don't try to figure it out. Okay? In all your ways acknowledge Him and He will direct your paths. As I said earlier, we don't live in a problem-free life. There's no such thing as a problem-free life because it's always something. In this life, let me give you a little help. If it's not one thing, it's what? Another. Yeah, that's the way it goes. And if you have a list of problems in your life, the moment that you knock off the biggest problem, number 2 gets promoted. Did you know that? Yeah, if you got a list 1 through 10 and you settle one, guess what? Number 2 is going to end up being 1. And you're going to go through your entire life trying to solve your problems instead of enjoying living. Huh? I mean, if you can't change it, enjoy it. I mean, that's where we go. I mean, here is a word that I use a lot, and I already alluded to it tonight. There is a word for a series of problems. What's that word? Life. Life. That's just life. I'm going to tell you something, guys. That's life. Now, you got to learn to have peace in the middle of your storm. Wow, that's pretty good stuff right there. I wish I had another 45 minutes. We'll do it when I get back. When I get back. Let's see, today's Wednesday, isn't it? Well, I'll have it figured out by next Wednesday. We'll come in here with all kind of peace next week. Why is just life just one problem after another? I'm going to give you these 3 reasons. I've got 3 minutes to do it. There are 3 reasons. First, Adam choked it. He blew it. The reason there's life filled with problems is because there was a place called the Garden of Eden, and Adam and Eve blew it. Okay? We live in a fallen world. Number 2 is we have an enemy, and his name is Satan. Let me stop you long enough to tell you the books are here. And I was going to bring one down here and show it to you tonight. But I forgot it. I was doing something else, actually. I was in a meeting with David, and he disrupted my chain of thought, I think. I'm pretty sure it was his fault. I'm pretty sure it wasn't mine. I mean, here's the deal. Satan wants to mess up your life. Jesus said he came to what? To kill, to steal, and destroy. That's his job. That's his business. And you want me to tell you a little secret? He is good at it. Huh? Amen. Yeah. And somebody asked me one time, how do you know there's a real devil? I said, I do business with that sucker. Yeah. Hadn't you? Absolutely. Absolutely. He wants to mess up your health. He wants to mess up your mind. He wants to mess up your family. He wants to mess up your finances. He wants to mess you up. Doesn't he? And you know what? You look at a prime example right here, son. There was a time in my life when I was so screwed up, I'd make a termite and a yo-yo look real. I mean, my life was messed up. And you know what? I was so smart. I thought I could fix it. Now, I made some real good promises to God. I'm not looking at you, Dale. I'm looking at Clyde now. Now I'm looking at Clyde. Have you ever made real, sincere, heart-wrenching, gut-trembling promises to God? Like when you're leaning over a commode and your head is further down than you ever intended for it to be, and you thought you was dying. Don't say nothing, Clyde. I'm not. And then you pray. This is your prayer. God, if you just don't let me die, I'm never going to drink again. I promise. Oh, I raise my hand to glory, God. If you don't let me die tonight, I'm never going to drink again. Woo! Hallelujah! I'm never going to drink again. Next morning comes. Oh God, I'm headache. My head is killing me. Man, I need a drink. Hello? Yeah. Here's the truth of the matter is, many, many times in our lives, we made a bad world worse by making dumb decisions. Most of the time, and you've heard me say this so many times, just dog-eared. Most of the time, I'm pretty well convinced Satan don't mess with my life. You know why? Because I'm messing it up. Listen, I'm giving that sucker a holiday in my life. Cliff's my worst enemy. I'm just telling you right straight up. There are always going to be things that bring problems and pain in your life. But always remember this. God has a plan. All right.